Good morrow, scholars. Welcome finally back to Shiver. I know I've been gone a really long time, and I'm sorry about that, and I'm sorry it took so long to come back, but I'm feeling a lot better. I've been doing a lot more working out. I've been hanging out with friends a bit more often. Hopefully Wednesday, I guess tomorrow, I'll be out and about all day. So here's hoping. Today I'm not doing too much, so I'm going to be doing some bulk recording, I think. I might end up doing 4 videos today before I turn off the computer. Anywho, before I drag on for another minute and a half, we are in chapter 18 or 19? It's been so long, I don't remember. I'll say chapter 18, even though the first line's kind of awkward. Grace, 38 degrees Fahrenheit. That night, Sam stayed in my bed again, chastely perched on the farthest edge of the mattress, but somehow during the night our bodies migrated together. I half woke early in the morning, long before dawn, the room washed clean by pale moonlight, and found that I was pressed up against Sam's back, my hands balled up to my chest like a mummy. I can't sleep like that. You know, just because lack of circulation. I could just barely see the dark curve of his shoulder, and something about the shape of it the gesture it suggested filled me with a sort of fierce, awful affection. What? His body was warm, and he smelled so good. What? Like wolf and trees and home, that I buried my face in his shoulder and closed my eyes again. He made a soft noise and rolled his shoulders back against me, pressing closer. Right before I drifted back to sleep again, my breathing slowed to match his. I had a brief, burning thought. I can't live without this. There has to be a cure. Chapter 19. Grace, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. The next day was unseasonably fair. Too beautiful to be going to school, but I couldn't skip a second day without coming up with a really good excuse. It wasn't that I'd get too far behind, it just seemed that when you never miss school for a certain length of time, people tend to notice when you do. Rachel had already called twice and left an ominous voicemail saying I'd picked the wrong day to cut class. Grace Brisbane. Olivia hadn't called since our argument in the hall, so I guessed that meant we weren't on speaking terms. Sam drove me to school in the Bronco while I hastily caught up on some of my English homework. I hadn't done the day before. Sorry. I kind of paused to take a breath. Anyway. Once he'd parked, I opened the door, letting in a gust of unseasonably warm air. Sam turned his face toward the open door, his eyes half closed. I love this weather. I feel so me. If you look, it's very bright over here. The reason for that is the rain's finally gone away, and now everyone's freaking out because we might be suffering drought conditions in the near future. Also, it's very hot outside. I don't want to go out. Watching him bask in the sun, winter seemed a million miles away, and I couldn't imagine him leaving me. I wanted to memorize the crooked line of his nose for later daydreaming. For a moment, I felt an irrational stab of guilt that my feelings for Sam were replacing those I'd had for my wolf. Until I remembered that he was my wolf. All over again, I had the weird sensation of the ground shifting beneath me at the fact of his existence, immediately followed by relief. My obsession was so easy now. The only thing I had to explain to my friends was where my new boyfriend had come from. I guess I have to go, I said. I don't want to. Sam's eyes opened the rest of the way and focused on me. I'll be here when you get back. I promise, he added, very formal. May I use your car? I'd like to see if Beck's still human, and if not, whether his house has the power turned on. I nodded, but part of me hoped the power would be off at Beck's house. I kind of wanted Sam back in my bed, where I could keep him from disappearing like the dream that he was. I'm uncomfortable. Where was I? I climbed out of the Bronco with my backpack. Don't get any tickets, Speed Racer. As I came around the front of the vehicle, Sam rolled down his window. Hey. What? Shyly, he said. Come here, Grace. I smiled at the way he said my name and returned to the window, smiling wider when I realized what he wanted. His careful kiss didn't fool me. As soon as I parted my lips slightly, he sighed and pulled back. I'll make you late for school. I grinned. I was on top of the world. You'll be back at 3? Wouldn't miss it. Sudden snowstorm. Anyway, I watched him pull out of the lot, already feeling the length of the school day stretching before me. A notebook smacked my arm. Who was that? I turned to Rachel and tried to think of something that was easier than the truth. My ride? Rachel didn't push the issue, mostly because her brain was already on something else. She grabbed my elbow and began steering me toward the school. Surely there had to be some kind of eternal reward waiting for me for going to school on a gorgeous day like this with Sam in my car. Rachel wiggled my arm to get my attention. Grace, focus. There was a wolf outside of the school yesterday in the parking lot. Like everyone saw it when school got out. What? I turned and looked over my shoulder at the lot, trying to imagine a wolf amongst the cars. The sparse pine trees that bordered the lot didn't connect with boundary wood. The wolf would have had to cross several streets and yards to get to the parking lot. What did it look like? Rachel gave me a weird look. The wolf? I nodded. Like a wolf. Gray. Rachel saw my withering look and shrugged. I don't know. Grace, bluish gray with mucky, gross scratches on his shoulder. It looked scruffy. So it was Jack. It had to be. It must have been total chaos, I said. Yeah, you should have been here, wolf girl. Seriously, nobody got hurt. Thank goodness. But Olivia completely freaked out. The whole school was freaked out. Isabel was totally hysterical and made a huge scene. Rachel squeezed my arm. So why didn't you pick up your phone anyway? We walked to the school. The doors were propped open to let in the balmy air. Battery died. Rachel made a face and spoke louder to be heard over the crush of students in the hall. So, are you sick? I never thought I'd live to see the day that you didn't make it to class. Between you not being in class and wild animals roaming the parking lot, I thought the world was coming to an end. I was waiting for the rains of blood. You gotta love friends like that. I think I got some sort of 24-hour bug, I replied. Ew, should I not touch you? But instead of moving away, Rachel slammed her shoulder into mine with a grin. I laughed and shoved her off, and as I did, I saw Isabel Culpepper. My smile faded. She was leaning against the wall by one of the drinking fountains, her shoulders hunched forward. At first I thought she was looking at her cell phone, but then I realized her hands were empty and she was just staring at the ground. If she hadn't been such an ice princess, I would have thought she was crying. I wondered if I should talk to her. As if reading my thoughts, Isabel looked up then, and her eyes, so similar to Jack's, met mine. I could read the challenge in them. So what are you looking at, huh? Some people can be rude. I looked away quickly and kept walking with Rachel, but I had the uncomfortable sense of things left unsaid. I have that problem too. I forget what the French word is, but translated to English, it means literally the width of the staircase. It refers to words you think of after, what do you call it? After an argument, something you should have said at a certain point that would have been just perfect as a comeback. Anyway, chapter 23. Sam, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. As I lay in Grace's bed that night, jarred by news of Jack's appearance at the school, I stared, sleepless, out into a blackness interrupted only by the dim halo of her hair on her pillow. And I thought about wolves who didn't act like wolves, and I thought about Krista Bowman. Sorry. It had been years since the memory of Krista had crossed my mind, but Grace's frowning account of Jack lurking where he didn't belong had brought it all back. I remembered the last day I saw her, when Krista and Beck were fighting in the kitchen, the living room, the hall, the kitchen again, growling and shouting at each other like circling wolves. I'd been young, about 8, so Beck had seemed like a giant then, a narrow, furious god barely containing his anger. Round and round the house he went with Krista, a heavy-set young woman with a face made blotchy by rage. You killed 2 people, Krista. When are you going to face up to that? Killed? Killed? Her voice was so shrill in my ears. Claws on glass. What about me? Look at me. My life is over. It's not over, Beck snapped. You're still breathing, aren't you? Your heart's still beating. I can't say the same for your 2 victims. I remember shrinking back at Krista's voice, a throaty and barely understandable scream. This is not a life. Beck raged at her about selfishness and responsibility, and she shot back with a string of profanity that I was shocked by. I'd never heard those words before. How about that guy in the basement? Beck snapped. I could just see Beck's back from my vantage point in the hall. You bit him, Krista. You've ruined his life now. And you killed 2 people just because they called you some nasty words. I kept waiting to see some remorse. Heck, I just take a guarantee that this won't happen again. Why would I guarantee anything? What have you ever given me? Krista snarled. Her shoulders hunched and twisted. You call yourselves a pack. You're a coven. You're an abomination. You're a cult. I'll do what I want. I'll get through this life how I want. Beck's voice was terribly, terribly even. I remember being suddenly sorry for Krista then, because Beck stopped sounding angry when he was at his worst. Promise me that this won't happen again. She looked straight at me then. No, not at me. Through me. Her mind was someplace far away, escaping the reality of her changing body. I could see a vein standing out right down the middle of her forehead, and I noticed that her fingernails were claws. I don't know you anything. Yep. Beck said very quietly, Get out of my house. She did. She slammed the glass door so hard that the dishes in the kitchen cabinets rattled. A few moments later I heard the door open and shut again, much quieter as Beck went after her. I remembered that it had been cold enough out that I was worried Beck would change for the winter and leave me alone in the house. That fear was enough to make me slide out of the hallway into the living room as I heard a massive crack. Beck quietly let himself back into the house, shivering with the cold and the threat of the change, and he carefully laid a gun on the counter as though it was made of glass. Then he noticed me standing in the living room, arms across my chest, my fingers clutching my biceps. I still remembered the way his voice sounded when he said, Don't touch that, Sam. Hollow, ragged. He'd gone into his office and laid his head down on his arms for the rest of the day. At dusk, he and Ulrich had gone outside, voices low and hushed. Through the window, I'd seen Ulrich get a shovel from the garage. And now, here I was, lying in Grace's bed. Somewhere out there was Jack. Angry people didn't make good werewolves. Huh. While Grace was in school, I had driven by Beck's house. The driveway was empty and the windows were dark. I hadn't had the heart to go inside and see how long it had been unoccupied. Without Beck to enforce the pack's safety, who was supposed to keep Jack in line? An unwelcome sense of responsibility was starting to pinch at the back of my throat. Beck had a cell phone, but I couldn't remember the number, no matter how long I rifled through my memories. I pressed my face against the pillow and prayed that Jack wouldn't bite anyone, because if he became a problem, I didn't think I was strong enough to do what would have to be done. Chapter 21. Sam. 57 degrees Fahrenheit. When Grace's alarm went off the next morning at 6:45 for school, screaming electronic obscenities. Sorry. It would be one of my videos, though, if I didn't mess up. Anyway, in my ear, I instantly shot straight up into the air, heart pounding, just as I had the day before. My head was stuffed full of dreams, wolves and humans, and blood smeared on my lips. Grace mumbled, unconcerned, and pulled up the sheets up around her neck. Turn that off, would you? I'm getting up. I'll be up in a second. She rolled over, her blonde head barely visible over the edge of the blanket, and sank into the bed as if she had grown into the mattress. And that was it. She was asleep, and I was not. I leaned back against her headboard and let her lie by my side. Warm and dreaming for a few more minutes, I stroked her hair with careful fingers, tracing a line from her forehead around her ear and down to just the top of her long neck. Where was I? Where her hair stopped being proper and instead little baby fluffs that went every which way. They were fascinating, these soft feathers that would grow up to be her hair. I was incredibly tempted to bend down and bite them, ever so softly, to wake her up, and kiss her and make her late for school, but I couldn't stop thinking about Jack and Krista and people who made bad werewolves. If I went to the school, would I still be able to follow Jack's trail with my weaker sense of smell? Grace, I whispered, wake up. She made a soft noise that, roughly translated, meant, I'm not going to say, in sleep language. Time to wake up, I said, and stuck my finger into her ear. Ugh, I can feel it. I don't like it. Where was I? Grace squealed and smacked at me. She was up. Our mornings together were beginning to have the comfort of routine. While Grace, still dogged by sleep, stumbled toward the shower, I put a bagel in the toaster for each of us and convinced the coffee maker to do something that sounded like making coffee. Back in her bedroom, I listened to Grace sing tunelessly in the shower while I pulled my jeans on and checked her drawers for socks that didn't look too girly for me to borrow. I heard my breathing stop without feeling it. Photographs nestled amongst her neatly folded socks. Pictures of the wolves, of us. Carefully, I lifted the stack out of the drawer and retreated to the bed, turning my back to the door as if I were doing something illicit. I paged through the pictures with slow fingers. There was something fascinating about seeing these images with my human eyes. Some of the wolves I could attach human names to, the older ones who had always changed before me. Beck, big, bulky, blue-gray. Paul, black and clean-looking. Ulrich, brownish-gray. Salem, with his notched ear and running eye. I sighed, though I didn't know why. The door behind me opened, letting in a gust of steam that smelled like Grace's soap. Grace stepped behind me and rested her head on my shoulder. I breathed in the scent of her. I'm uncomfortable. Looking at yourself, she asked. My fingers, flicking between the photos, froze. I'm in here? Grace came around the side of the bed and sat down facing me. Of course. Most of them are of you. You don't recognize yourself? Oh, of course you wouldn't. Tell me who's who. Huh. I didn't think about that until she said something. I'm kind of dumb. Slower, I paged through the images again as she shifted to sit next to me, the bed groaning with her movements. That's Beck. He's always taken care of the new wolves, though there'd only been 2 newly made wolves since me, Krista, and the wolf that she'd created, Derek. I have a friend named Derek. The fact was, I wasn't used to younger newcomers. Our pack usually grew by other older wolves finding us, not by the addition of savagely born newbies like Jack. Beck's like a father to me. It sounded weird to say it like that, even if it was true. I'd never had to explain it to anyone before. He had been the one to take me under his wing after I had escaped from my house and those who carefully glued the fragments of my sanity back together. I could tell how you felt about him, Grace said, and she sounded surprised at her own intuition. Your voice is different whenever you talk about him. Is it? That was my turn to be surprised. Different how? I could see that. That makes sense. She shrugged, looking a little shy. I don't know. Proud, I guess. I think it's sweet. Who's that? Shelby, I said. There was no pride in my voice for her. I told you about her before. Grace watched my face. The memory of the last time Shelby and I had seen each other made my gut twist uncomfortably. She and I don't see things the same way. She thinks being a wolf is a gift. Beside me, Grace nodded, and I was grateful to leave it at that. I flipped through the next few photographs, more of Shelby and Beck, until I paused at Paul's black form. That's Paul. He's our pack leader when we're wolves. That's Ulrich right next to him. I pointed down to the brown-gray wolf beside Paul. Ulrich's like a crazy uncle, sort of. A German one. He swears a lot. Sounds great. He's a lot of fun. Actually, I should have said he was a lot of fun. I didn't know if this had been his last year, or if he might still have another summer in him. I remembered his laugh, like a flock of crows taking off, and the way he held on to his German accent, like he couldn't be Ulrich without it. You know, I'm part German. It's kind of a ways down the line, but if white people who are like 1/16 Cherokee can say that makes them Native American, then that means I'm German. I actually have an English to German and vice versa dictionary in here somewhere. I was going to start studying it. The only thing is, I don't want to learn through a book by itself because the pronunciation would be a little bit more difficult. I'm much better at listening to and then copying. Anyway, back to the book. Are you okay? Grace asked, frowning at me. I shook my head, staring at the wolves in the photographs, so clearly animals when seen through my human eyes. My family. Me. My future. Somehow, the photographs blurred a line I wasn't ready to cross yet. I realized Grace had her arm around my shoulder, her cheek leaning against me, comforting me even though she couldn't possibly understand what was bothering me. I wish you could have met them, I said, when everybody was human. I didn't know how to explain to her what an enormous part of me they were, their voices and faces as humans, and their scents and forms as wolves. How lost I felt now, the only one wearing human skin. Tell me something about them, Grace said, her voice muffled against my t-shirt. I let my mind flit over memories. Beck taught me how to hunt when I was 8. I hated it. I remembered standing in Beck's living room, staring out at the first ice-covered tree branches of winter, brilliant and winking in the morning sun. The backyard seemed like a dangerous and alien planet. Why did you hate it? Grace asked. I don't like the sight of blood. I don't like hurting things. I was 8. In my memories, I seemed small, ribby, innocent. I had spent all of the previous summer letting myself believe that this winter with Beck would be different, that I wouldn't change, and that I'd go on eating the eggs Beck cooked for me forever. But as the nights grew colder, and even short trips outside made my muscles shake, I knew the time was coming soon when I wouldn't be able to avoid the change, and that Beck wouldn't be around to cook much longer. But that didn't mean I would go willingly. Why hunt, then? Grace asked, ever logical. Why not just leave food out for yourselves? Ha! I asked Beck the same question, and Ulrich said, Ha! And the raccoons and possums, too? That wasn't a very good accent, but I'll do better next time. Anyway, Grace laughed, unduly delighted by my lousy impression of Ulrich's accent. See, I kinda did something right. Before I leave, I need to remember to show you guys something. I felt a rush of warmth in my cheeks. It felt good to talk to her about the pack. There we go. I loved the glow in her eyes, the curious quirk in her mouth. What? She knew what I was, and she wanted to know more. But that didn't mean it was right to tell her, someone outside the pack. Beck had always said, the only people we have to protect us is us. But Beck didn't know Grace, and Grace wasn't only human. She may not have changed, but she had been bitten. She was wolf on the inside. She had to be. So what happened? Grace asked. What did you hunt? Bunnies, of course, I replied. Beck took me out while Paul waited in a van to collect me afterward in case I was unstable enough to change back. I couldn't forget how Beck had stopped me by the door before we went out, bending double so he could look into my face. I was motionless, trying not to think about changing bodies and snapping a rabbit's neck between my teeth. I'm sad. About saying goodbye to Beck for the winter, he had taken my thin shoulder in his hand and said, Sam, I'm sorry. Don't be scared. I hadn't said anything because I was thinking it was cold and Beck wouldn't change back after the hunt, and then I'd have no one who knew how to cook my eggs right. Beck made perfect eggs. More than that, Beck kept me Sam. Back then, with the scars on my wrists still so fresh, I'd been so dangerously close to fracturing into something that was neither human nor wolf. What are you thinking about? Grace asked. You stopped talking. I looked up. I hadn't realized I'd looked away from her. Changing. Grace's chin, pressed into my shoulder as she looked into my face. Her voice was hesitant. She asked me a question she'd asked before. Does it hurt? I thought of the slow, agonizing process of the change, the bending of muscles, the bulging of skin, the grinding of bones. The adults had always tried to hide their shifts from me, wanting to protect me. But it wasn't seeing them change that scared me. The sight only made me pity them, since even Beck groaned with the pain of it. It was changing myself that terrified me now. Forgetting Sam. I was a bad liar, so I didn't bother to try. Yes. It kind of makes me sad to think of you having to do that as a little kid, Grace said. She was frowning at me, blinking two shiny eyes. Actually, it bothers me a lot. Poor little Sam. She touched my chin with a finger, and I leaned into her hand. Huh. I remembered being so proud that I hadn't cried while I changed that time, unlike when I was younger and my parents had watched me, eyes round with horror. I remembered Beck the wolf bounding away and leading me into the woods, and I remembered the warm, bitter sensation of my first kill on my muzzle. I had changed back again after Paul, bundled up in a coat and hat, had retrieved me. Retrieved? Yeah. I was in the van on the way home. It was in the van on the way home that loneliness hit me. I was alone. Beck wouldn't be human again that year. Now it was like I was 8 years old all over again. Alone and newly scarred. My chest ached, my breath squeezed out of me. Show me what I look like, I asked Grace, tilting the photos toward her. Please? I let her take the stack from my hand and watched her face light up as she flipped through the pictures, looking for one in particular. There, that one's my favorite of you. I looked at the photo she had handed me. A wolf looked back at me, wearing my eyes. A still wolf watching from the woods, sunlight touching the edges of its fur. I looked and looked, waiting for it to mean something, waiting for a prickling of recognition. It seemed unfair that the other wolves' identities were so clear to me in their photographs, but that mine was hidden. What was in this photograph, in that wolf, that made Grace's eyes light up? What if it wasn't me? What if she was in love with some other wolf and she only thought it was me? How would I ever know? Grace was oblivious to my doubts and misread my silence for fascination. She unfolded her legs and stood up, facing me, then ran a hand down my hair. What? She lifted her palm to her nose, inhaling deeply. You know, you still smell like you do when you're a wolf. And just like that, she said maybe the one thing that could have made me feel better. I'm uncomfortable. I handed her the photo on her way out. Grace stopped in the door, dimly silhouetted by the dull gray morning light, and looked back at me, at my eyes, my mouth, my hands, in a way that made something inside me knot and unknot unbearably. I didn't think I belonged here in her world, a boy stuck between two lives, dragging the dangers of the wolves with me. But when she said my name, waiting for me to follow, I knew I'd do anything to stay with her. Okay, let me get my book market, Phil. Alright. So, that ended up taking longer than I thought. Every time I want to end a video about 20 minutes in, I always get the longest chapter. Anyway, it's good to be back. I'm a little out of practice, though. I don't like sitting down for very long. Do I look thinner to you guys? Well, I guess you don't really see me from this angle, so you wouldn't really know. Anyway, alright, I'm gonna start reading Witch and Wizard next, and then, since it's been so long, I need to, just go all into this. I'm gonna start reading a couple of other books. I need to finish up, Heir to the Empire. It's been a long time. I need to do that, and look forward to a reading from Lost Stars, I think. Anyway, until next time, goodbye everybody. It's nice to be back.